Hello. Today I'm going to be showcasing an art package that I built. It's called shinyCache, and it helps you accelerate your Shiny apps at the expense of memory usage. But if the use case of your application is much more optimized for speed and resources in terms of memory, maybe it's not a priority, or it's a low memory use case that you would still rather just accelerate, shinyCache works very well for you. So I'm going to create a new application from scratch with the default Shiny app that RStudio provides. The package is called shinyCache, so I'm going to call it right now. And it works very differently from the default caching that Shiny does. So if I run this application, the only thing it does, let me just close these tabs, is make a histogram based on user input, right? So here it renders this histogram, breaks with column, border, wide, etc., right? Cool. So if we were to kind of want to cache this, let's say this is a slow function. So I'm going to create right here a slow function. I'm going to call it slowHist, and it's going to be a function. In this case, the only input that it uses is the number of bins, right? So right here, I'm just going to copy this code. Let me paste it right there. Let me just, there you go. So yeah, and let's add a sys.sleep of 2 seconds, for example. So now here, what I would do, and here would be instead of input bins, it would just be bins, right? Cool. So here, if I just call my slowHist function, and here I would have bins equal to input bins, right? If I call this and I run the app, it should display here a histogram that is slow. It takes about 2 seconds to render. So if we look at the metadata that actually is inside this hist, like if we print this, let's just create it right here. So if I do here, if I print whatever's in slow hist and let's say for example 10. Oh yeah, I need to run this. If I print the data that's in there, it's just a list, right? This is a renderer. This has nothing to do with it. So we can cache this list, which doesn't have that much information, and have it inside a cache. And whenever the user puts in again the same number, it's not going to calculate it again. It's just gonna call this data and plot it. Cool. So let's actually do that. How I would do it with shinyCache, it's really easy. So let's look at the documentation for shinyCache. So shinyCache, it would be double, right? Yep. So shinyCache, no results. Okay, so I'm just gonna do it for the function. So if I take a look at the GitHub for shinyCache, here it is. For now, it only has one function, and that function is cache call. So here it is, cache call. And what cache call does, if I do here cache call, it takes in a function, it takes in a cache, and it takes in some parameters to pass on to the function. And what it does, it uses a hash table to go look for a previously done operation on that function with those parameters. You can also pass on parameters that are not don't affect the cache. You can pass in a prefix in case you want to differentiate different caches. You can use cache depends in case you want things that affect the cache but don't affect the function, or you can just have a custom ID. In this case, a custom ID, since this app is really simple, the custom ID could just be the number of bins, but we're not going to do that for now. We can use it later. So here, this operation that we're doing here, it's doing a slow hist, right? and it's taking a long time. Let's run it again. Look, it takes 2 seconds for me to calculate 30. If I go to 21, for example, it's going to calculate it here with 21 bins. And if I go back to 30, it's still going to take time. It's going to have to recalculate again. And again, since as we saw, this doesn't really take that much memory, since it's just like some points that need to be rendered. But we don't need to calculate all of this again. So we're going to use the cache call function. The cache here we would need to do, let's call it histogram. So this would be, I would have to use cache call. And I'm going to have to start putting in the arguments. Before that, this cache is actually a reactive values object. So we're going to have to define the cache. So I'm just going to call it cache. It's going to be our reactive values. There you go. That's our cache. And now we can pass it on to the function. So here the function fn would be slow hist. That will be our function. Our cache, well, it would just be cache, yeah, this object right here. Our parameters, we pass them on as a named list of parameters, as it says here in the documentation. So if I do cache params, in this case, the only argument is bins. So bins would equal to input bins, right? Input bins. And let's not have a prefix, like we don't need a prefix, it's only one object. We don't need to differentiate between caches, and we don't have any other parameters. So this would be our histogram. And what it would do is if the user has already calculated for the function slow hist with a certain number of bins, it's just gonna go ahead and retrieve the plot that has already been created, or not the plot, but the metadata. Since it only saves metadata, we may have to go and put in plot again. So plot histogram. And if we run it again, it's going to take 1, 2, 3. It took the 2 seconds to calculate. Let's go down to 23. It's going to take 2 seconds again. But if I go back to 30, it should not be calculating again. So if I go back to 30, let's go 26, takes a couple seconds, 30, instant, 26, instant, 30, instant, 26, instant, right? If I go to 1, it's going to have to calculate. There it goes. If I go back to 30 or 29, that's already been calculated, it goes instant. 30, instantly. If I go back to 1, instantly. So this accelerates my app a lot. It's really fast now. And if I go 31, it's been calculated already. 29, it's been calculated already. 26, it's already been calculated. So it gets instantly retrieved. And that's the benefit of using shinyCache. Here, what it does, it goes through a hash function and it saves the data into these reactive values. Yep, so let's say we wanted to use the same cache somewhere else in our app. For example, let's say let's copy this this data, right? Let's say we have another slider. Let's say we have another slider right here. Oops. And let's paste it right there. Let's call this bins2, right? And let's have another output right here. Plot output. It's going to be this plot2, right? So right here, let's copy this render plot. And I would have the same cache call, right? But instead of bins1, it would just be bins2 and output this plot2, right? Let's save this. Let's run it again. So right here we have R2, and let's say I move this one to 1, right? It's going to take some time to calculate this one, took R2 seconds. But if I move the second one to 1, it's going to go instantly because it's already been calculated, so it's cached. And I can call that cache somewhere else in the app. So if I go to 30 right here, it should move instantly. If I move this one to 30, it should go instantly. Oops, I put 29. So if I go to 50, for example, it calculated, and if I go in the second one and move it to 50, it's going to move instantly because it's saved in the cache. If I wanted to use a custom ID, in case I don't want the cache, shinyCache, to automatically set an ID to that object, if I were to use custom ID, for example, input bins, for example, now, wait, I need to, there you go. Now, it's probably not going to work as intended. Yeah, the index must be a string. So if I put in here, for example, paste ID, for example, ID, and I set here paste 0, just so that my custom ID actually works. Let's run it again. So now, since this one is using a custom ID for the cache, if I put this one to 50, it's going to calculate 50 right here. And if I move this one to 50, it's not going to be fast because this one is using a different custom ID. But if I were to use this exact same custom ID right here, and I would put this to bins 2, right? Then it would work as intended. So if I put this one to 50, there you go. If I put this one to 50, it works instantly. If I put this one back to 30, let's say I put this one to 1, takes 2 seconds. If I move this one to 1 now, it should move instantly. If I put this one to, for example, here 6, and then I put it took 2 seconds. If I put this one to 6, it's gonna go instantly. So yep, that's like the basics of how shinyCache works. I hope this is helpful to any of you. I use this a lot in my Shiny apps, especially when I want to optimize for speed. And the objects I'm caching are not very big, but they take time to calculate. For example, an API call and stuff like that. So I hope this is very helpful to you guys, and I hope you guys take a look at the GitHub. Any issues, you can open up any issues. I'll be looking at them. Thank you, and see you in another video.